Good morning. So this is a joint work with Perin, who used to be at INRIA when we did the work, and now he's with at University of Calgary, and I'm a research fellow at Harvard University. So I'm going to talk about ranking tables. So ranking tables is a very simple but efficient way to organize raw data. So here I have countries, and those countries, they are ranked by income. So you can immediately see which is the richest country. In that case, this is Kuwait. And here you have a slider, and you can see we are in the 1950. So Kuwait is by far the richest country. But you can see that it doesn't seem to do very well in terms of life expectancy. And the nice thing with rankings is that you can click on the headers, and you can reorganize the rows. So here I can now look up for Kuwait. I should have highlighted it first. So I'm going to track Kuwait through the rankings, and I can see that Kuwait is actually 46 in terms of life expectancy. And I can now rank by population, and you will see that Kuwait is actually one of the smallest countries. And many domains extensively use ranking. So here it's in economics, and we also work with people interested in soccer. And if you're a fan of soccer, you probably spend hours interacting with rankings. So like, you probably select your favorite team, and you select the rival team, and you're going to see over time how those teams perform. But as you can see, when you change time in rankings, it's really difficult to track teams and or track any row that is changing and up and down. And even if you have just one element, as we've seen, and I'm going to go back to the income, as you can see, if I change time, you don't really have a big picture. You don't really know how much change happened. So this is what we want to improve. We want to improve the overview of the rankings and the change over time. So what are our options? So we could add sparklines or bar charts within the table. We could use a totally different visualization, get rid of the table and use a line chart. Or we can build a fancy multidimensional visualization. So actually, usually the alternative to rankings is the line chart. So we're going to actually use the line chart. But most of people, when they use line charts to communicate rankings. And we're actually going to use the line charts to interact with the ranking. So how does it work? So this is our technique. So it's actually start with an ordinary table. And I'm going to zoom a little bit. Yep. And how it works. So I'm going to focus on a country I'm interested in. In that case, I'm interested in Luxembourg. And the technique works like this. So I click on a row on the column I'm interested in. And now I have a line chart. I have the line chart of the incomes for Luxembourg over time. And as you can see, so what I'm doing, I'm actually moving the mouse left and right. So I keep the mouse pressed. I move left and right. And as you can see, in the meantime, I change the sliders. That means I change time. And it's an informative change of time because I have a line chart. So I can see how Luxembourg did. So it's quite stable. So I can highlight Luxembourg. Now I want to compare with the US. So now I'm going to browse the US incomes. And as you can see, it was ahead of Luxembourg before, and then it was below. And if we go back to Kuwait, now I'm going to see Kuwait. And oh, what happened? So actually, I thought Kuwait was constantly one of the most richest country. But as you can see, there are some drops. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And yeah, and with our technique, you can get to the specific year. Here, look at the position of Kuwait when there was this drop in ranking, and I can look up for the year, and it's 1990s. And you can do that. You can apply this technique for all the rankings. Like with the previous soccer ranking, I can select my teams, and I can compare them across the countries. And I can see those interesting patterns where the teams permuted position. So we implemented the technique in D3 SVG, and we ran an exploratory study to understand how usable the technique is. And if you're interested in the results, you can read the paper. And I'm just going to mention the interesting findings. So actually, with our technique, the user can customize the rankings. And here, this is an economist, and he was interested in showing all the other countries as a background. As you can see, it's kind of a hairball. It's kind of difficult to see the rankings for all the countries. But when you interact with the technique, you highlight the country you're interested in, and the background only shows some sort of context. And it was more for him a confirmation to see that actually the drop only happens for this country, because he also used this other ranking, and he realized that the countries he was interested in had a drop in rank, but all the countries were also dropping. So that's more something that happened to all countries. we work with experts in soccer, and our expert was interested in adding those little dots on the line chart. And each dot represents a game, because it was very important for him to see the discrete nature of the championships. And actually, another thing you can do with the technique, you can customize this line chart. And you can customize the charts, those lines and those dots. And you can color the dots, let's say in green if, so this is still the soccer example. You can color the dots in green if there's a victory, a yellow if there is a draw, and a red if there is a loss. So I'm going to show you how it works interactively. So here I activated the dots. I'm interested in this team and this other team again. And I'm going to navigate. And here you can see that I still have the line chart. It didn't change the usability. It just added more information. And I can inspect this particular area. It seems there are lots of change. And I want to understand why Lyon dropped. So as you can see, those dots, they really explain why. Because they are red, because Lyon lost many games. So this is why his rank dropped. But then he started winning games, so the rank came back up again. And what's even more interesting is at the end of the championship, Lyon was losing many games, but he didn't drop in rank. We also perform studies with other kind of data sets, like this data set is with the InfoVis citations. And as you can see here, we colorate the line chart with the number of paper, we encoded the number of paper as those dots on the line chart. So here, the larger the dot is, the more paper this author published. And this explains why he had more paper over time. And it also shows that those publications happen during a very small amount of time. So there are actually a couple of limits to this with this technique. So first one is if you have rankings with lots of variation, like lots of drops and lots of ups and downs, it will impact the animation. Also, if there are missing data, well, you have to find a way to interpolate or to jump across the time points. Affordance, that's a big issue. Like, how can you tell this technique exists? Like, if you look at the table, if you haven't been trained before, you don't know that you can click and drag and you get all those lines. But we think that the most challenging part of our work is to find the best way to design the line chart. Because the line chart seems to be the way to add lots of more information when you explore the data, either as a context, as a background, or for the trajectory, for the focus you are currently interacting with. And here you can emphasize the highlight, and as we've seen before, you can add those little dots. And so this is why we published the toolkit we've used to create this prototype. We published it, it's on GitHub, and we'd be happy to collect any feedback. And we'll probably learn more about which interesting designs exist and how they match interesting data sets. And so thanks for your attention. I'm happy to take any questions.
I have a question. So have you thought about sometimes it may happen that you want to see where one of the values goes up and this another value goes down. Have you thought about interaction techniques or visualizations where you can sort of fix two columns and see how they go?
Yeah, that's one of the challenges we also mentioned in the paper, because so people usually want to compare two things. So in our case, we only drag from left to right. So I think to answer your question, you might want to drag up to get to the highest value or down to the lowest value. And another thing that our technique does is that we only focus on one element at a time, and we'll probably have to think of other input interaction that lets you select two elements and interact with those at the same time, but we haven't done anything in that direction.
Yes?
You mean during the animation or in general?
Yeah, like you see the date at the top, your dot at the top,
yeah.
There's a line with a dot on the zigzag line.
Yeah, so actually you can customize the scale. Sometimes it matches. Sometimes it doesn't because people want like to squeeze the line chart. So either vertically, horizontally, we try to match the scale, but usually, there's this distortion. But they didn't really complain about that.
Short question?
Dennis Wixon from USC. Particularly in comparing two sets of rankings, first of all, I'm very impressed with the tool. It looks like really good for visualization. But if you were comparing two rankings, have you considered adding some of the statistical tests for differences in ranking so that you could note whether or not the differences in ranking were significant?
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. Actually, so the rankings are actually relative. So sometimes you don't have any change, but the values change a lot. Or sometimes you have a change, but it's just because the two teams or the two countries, they were very close to each other. So we haven't thought about it, but that's definitely an interesting future work. Thank you.